From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Free Expression with Gerry Baker.
Hello and welcome to Free Expression from the opinion page of the Wall Street Journal. I'm Gerry Baker, editor-at-large of the Journal. If you're not already subscribing to Free Expression, please do sign up at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. This week, he's back in what can be called, without some of his traditional hyperbole, one of the greatest comebacks in political history. Donald Trump triumphed over Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential election. But Trump didn't just win, becoming only the second president in American history to be elected to non-consecutive terms of office. He secured one of the most comprehensive victories the Republican Party has achieved in decades. Now, counting continues as we record this on Wednesday lunchtime, but as it stands, it seems he's on course to win all 7 of the states that were up for grabs, battleground states, and he's on course to become the first Republican to win the popular vote since George W. Bush in 2004. He led his party to take back control of the Senate, and the GOP also looks to have a pretty solid chance of retaining control of the House. A sweep, a trifecta, whatever you want to call it. But perhaps most impressive of all was the breadth and the depth of Trump's presidential victory. He advanced the Republican vote deeply in both blue and red states, notching up a 13-point margin of victory in Florida, once seen as a swing state, a 14-point advantage in Texas, cutting the Democratic lead in Illinois, true blue Illinois, to just 5 points, and in New York to just 12. The exit polls indicate that he won as much as 45% of Latino votes, perhaps more than 20% of black men, and he made substantial gains among younger voters, especially young men. So how did he do it, and what does it all mean? Well, with me to discuss this, to reveal some of the secrets of the most successful GOP campaign in 3 decades, I'm joined by Michael Whatley, the chairman of the Republican National Committee. Michael, thanks for joining Free Expression.
Great to be on with you today.
First of all, let me say congratulations. Have you come down from Cloud 9 yet?
You know, it's going to take a little while for that, but I'll tell you, it's a really great feeling. It was a big night last night, really the culmination of 9 years of campaigning, at this level for President Trump, and really, truly a historic win, the greatest political comeback in American political history. And we're excited. I think that, him coming out of this with a clear mandate, we're going to keep the House, we're going to keep the Senate, and him being back in office is really going to give him the opportunity to have a common sense mandate going forward.
As I said in my introduction, this wasn't just a victory. It was, as you say, and not just a trifecta victory with presidency, Senate and House, it looks like, but it was the breadth and the depth of the victory, I think, that we saw. The extraordinary performance across the country for Trump's presidential vote, making headway into constituencies that Republicans have not traditionally made such headway, winning the popular vote for the first time since George W. Bush in 2004. Be honest with me, Michael, did you see this coming?
We felt that it was possible. You think about the amount of time that we spent on a campaign talking with low propensity voters, people that had not been out, had not voted in the last 2, 4, or 6 years, and making sure that they understand how important their vote was going to be. That's one side of it, as well as the fact that President Trump made a very concerted effort to reach out to groups that are not traditionally Republican. Him bringing on Elon Musk and Tulsi Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. really, truly kind of signaled that this is going to be a common sense coalition. And then the fact that he went in and did events in the Bronx and in Philadelphia and Detroit and Chicago and Atlanta. Really, I think that's why we saw historic shifts among black voters, among Hispanic voters, Asian American voters. You talk about him winning the popular vote. As you said, it was extremely broad, extremely wide. So we're very happy about this. I think the president does have that common sense mandate really going forward to be able to put together an America First agenda and move it through Congress and get it done.
In terms of the issues that mattered to voters, what do you think was key? Was it things we've been talking about all along, the economy, immigration, crime? Was that, do you think, really the decisive factors?
It is. I mean, at the end of the day, the American people made a choice. They want a strong America. They want a strong community. They want a country where their family can move forward, move up the economic ladder. And that really comes down to inflation. It comes down to the economy. When people are fighting to get to the end of the month because grocery prices, gasoline prices, and housing prices are all well up so dramatically due to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's inflationary spending. That was a real important issue. Immigration, the fact that we do have 10, 12, 15 million illegal immigrants and the burdens that has placed on communities all across the country. Every state is now a border state. Fentanyl and migrant crime are very real issues for every community right now. People did not want to continue down that road. They don't see America as a social experiment the way that the Biden-Harris and their administration do. What they really want is a government focused on them and the issues that they care about.
Let's talk about some of these voting groups into which Trump has made incredible progress for a Republican. And you mentioned it a little bit, but let's talk about Hispanics in particular. We're seeing these exit polls that suggest the president may have got, something in the range of 45% of Hispanics, essentially meaning that, Hispanics maybe now no longer can be regarded in a sense almost as a separate voting constituency. They're voting in almost the same kind of numbers as white Americans. What was the key, do you think, to getting that level of success with the Latino community?
It was talking directly to the community, talking to them about the issues that they care about. Those communities, the Hispanic communities all across the country, they don't want to be pandered to. What they want to know is, are your policies going to help them? Right. And they care about inflation, gas prices, grocery prices. They care about making sure they have a safe community. They want their kids to be able to go to school and learn, things like math and reading instead of having to deal with transgender ideology and boys and girls sports. They really, truly are functioning on wanting to get into America the legal way and be able to succeed and thrive here. That's what Donald Trump talked to them about. And so really happy, very excited to see the numbers that came from the Hispanic community last night. That level of success, really unprecedented, and was one of our key components to a lot of the wins that we had in places like Nevada, Arizona, Texas, and Florida.
There was a lot of comment in the media about that rally at Madison Square Garden, like 10 days or so ago, when some people suggested, you had that guy who made that rather unfortunate crack about Puerto Rico and that this might perhaps damage the president's standing with Latinos. Didn't seem to. Were you concerned at all about what happened there?
Yeah, we were. But, understand those were not the president's words. Those are not the president's values. We made very clear to everybody that was the case. And you compare that to what we saw coming out of the Kamala Harris campaign and the Biden White House with the vitriol that they were throwing directly at people. When Joe Biden calls half the country garbage, when we see Mark Cuban saying that women are dumb and weak, when we see Kamala Harris calling President Trump a Nazi, despite the fact that nobody has done more to help the Israeli people and the Jewish people, those are the types of insults that really, truly affected. And really, our closing argument was Donald Trump is going to restore our southern border, rebuild our economy, and make sure that America is strong enough to protect our interests and our allies around the world. Kamala Harris's closing argument, which obviously fell very flat, was, you are all a bunch of horrible, terrible people. Please vote for me.
Another big group, again, where I said in my introduction, the president did well, was doing much better among black voters, particularly black men. Can you tell us about that again, the extent to which that, I know, the president famously made a couple of stops, appeared in the Bronx, of course, a big Latino community there too, went to some of these places where perhaps Republicans have not really campaigned before. Tell us a bit about how that played out.
Well, look, I think the president made a concerted effort. When you talk about rallies in downtown Detroit, downtown Atlanta, downtown New York, obviously Madison Square Garden, but the Bronx as well. He went into Chicago and was always willing on any platform, and he went on Joe Rogan and he went on multiple other podcasts, had the conversation with Elon Musk. He will go anywhere and talk to any community. But again, the core messaging was the same. It's about the economy, immigration. It's about safe communities. It's about education. And it's really about how do you uplift families and communities and allow them to thrive in America. And in order for that to happen, you have to have a solid economy that works for every American family.
Flip side, obviously, is, again, the gender gap that everybody's familiar with. Kamala Harris did win women as expected. How much were you concerned throughout the campaign about the abortion issue, which obviously, polls suggested was of all the issues, was the one issue that was favored Democrats? The president talked a lot about it. He made clear he was against the national abortion ban. He talked in ways, frankly, that very few Republicans have spoken about abortion in the last 20 years or so. Was that a concern for you? I mean, either a concern that, you might kind of alienate conservative voters when the president started talking about abortion in the way that he did, in being ways that were sort of quite permissive about abortion, or indeed, the Harris campaign hammering hard on the abortion issue, that might hurt you with women?
Yeah, well, what we did was we listened to the American voters. We went out into the field. We polled people. We talked to people. We did focus focus groups. We really, truly wanted to understand what issues the American voters care about. And on every single one of those surveys, the answer came back. People care about gasoline, grocery, and housing prices. They care about illegal immigrants, and they care about their communities being overrun by fentanyl and migrant crime. Abortion was way down on the list. It was not something that was top of mind for anybody other than the Democratic campaigns, which were trying to make it an issue, despite the fact that the voters are far more worried about the economic issues, far more worried about their pocketbooks and their families. And the president did, I think appropriately, come out with a position that basically said we spent 50 years trying to defederalize this issue. It should be handled at the state level. That's where we are today. And the vast majority of the American public accepted that answer and moved on.
We're going to take a short break there, but when we come back, I'll have more with Michael Whatley, chair of the Republican National Committee. We are, of course, talking about Donald Trump's historic presidential election victory and the wider Republican victory in Tuesday's elections. Stay with us.
You're listening to Free Expression with Gerry Baker. Don't forget, you can listen to the latest episode anytime on your smart speaker. Just say, play the Opinion Free Expression podcast. Now, back to Gerry Baker.
I'm back with Michael Whatley, chairman of the Republican National Committee. We're talking about extraordinary election results we've just seen on Tuesday. Talk about just some of the specifics of voting. One big difference this year from 2020, and I'd like to get a sense of how important this was to you and how you went about it, was, of course, early voting. You know, we saw this coming in earlier at the beginning of this week and the end of last week. These huge numbers of registered Republicans voting early in states like Pennsylvania, way more proportionately than Democrats, and Democrat numbers, by contrast, way down. How much of a role do you think that effort to get voters to the polls this time early, how important do you think that was?
I think it's tremendously important. You know, President Trump, throughout the course of the campaign, was very clear. It's great if you want to vote early. It's great if you want to vote by mail. It's great if you want to vote on Election Day. The key is make a plan and deliver the vote. We saw Republican voters follow that very, very clearly, very closely. And we did see record turnout in early vote and mail-in vote. You know, the fact is, over half of all ballots are going to be cast in a national election going forward. We had half of them were cast that way this year. And so you have to run a national early vote program. You've got to talk to those voters before they go vote. You got to make sure they're informed voters. And so we retooled our entire campaign to make sure that we were getting messaging into those voters before they went. Traditionally, Republican campaigns backloaded all of those conversations for the last week or two. It doesn't do you any good to spend money running ads and running outreach to people who have already voted. So by virtue of tracking all of that, understanding who our voters were that had already voted early, that allowed us to take resources and plow them into turning other voters out, making sure that we were talking to persuadable voters and being able to bring them on board. So, yeah, we're very happy with the mechanics and the operations regarding the early votes here.
What do you think are the most important, one or two maybe most important campaign messages that you hit? I'm thinking particularly about campaign commercials. There were a couple of very memorable ones. A lot of people talked about the one that focused on Kamala Harris's support for public funding of prisoners who wanted to change gender. There were some other ones too. What sticks out in your mind as messages that really resonated with voters?
You know, the single most important message was, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? The fact that Kamala Harris had said in multiple different interviews that she would not change a single policy position from the last 4 years, the failed policy positions that led us into the inflationary crisis that we're in, that led us to the illegal immigration crisis that we are dealing with, that led us to a weakened standing on the border. And when she doubled down on every single one of those positions, we were able to kind of crystallize that for everybody that says, do you want to go in a different direction? Do you want to have a strong America? Or do you want to continue down this same policy path that we've been down for the last 4 years? That gave everybody a very clear contrast, and I think that that's really what drove a lot of the discussions.
Of course, you started off running this campaign against one candidate and ended up running against another. When that switch was made, when after the Biden's disastrous debate performance and he dropped out, and then just days later, Harris emerged as the candidate, how concerned were you about that? Because you were no longer running against the incumbent president. You were running, as you've just said, you were running against the candidate who stood by the president's record. But, she was new, she was fresh, she could offer something. She clearly was not the mental state that Joe Biden was. Did that require a kind of a retooling of the campaign at that point?
Not at all. The fact is that rather than running against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we were running for the American people. We were able to put a campaign together based around the simple premise of making America great again. Donald Trump pledged to rebuild our southern border, restore our economy, and ensure that America is strong enough to protect our interests at home and abroad. That did not change. The fact is that the Biden-Harris administration inherited a very strong economy and broke it. They inherited a very strong southern border and broke it. They inherited a strong standing in the world and broke it. And Donald Trump rightfully claimed that if he win, he would fix it. Our messaging on that did not change when she changed over, primarily because she was going to adopt and ultimately did every single one of those failed policy positions.
Were you surprised that she didn't make more of an explicit effort to distance herself from Joe Biden? We had that famous moment in the interview, I think, on The View, when she was asked if she'd change anything, and she said, I can't actually think of anything I'd changed. Were you expecting her to try to put more of a distance between herself and Biden?
I did, particularly because they kept telling everybody that that was what they were going to do. And when that interview came out, we were a little bit surprised that that was the line she used. But then she doubled down on it over the course of the next several weeks in multiple different interviews and made it very clear that no, she was not going to go in a different direction, that she was going to double down on those same failed policies, which really provided us with an important inflection point going into the election.
Let's just talk briefly about the other big successes for the Republicans in Congress. First, the Senate. Currently, we're recording this Wednesday lunchtime. By the time some listeners hear this, and seats will have been declared. I mean, it looks as though probably one more Pennsylvania. Dave McCormick may get over the line in Pennsylvania, so bringing the Senate Republican total to 53. Are you still holding out hope for any more?
We got to wait and see what the count's going to look like in Nevada. We're very bullish on Sam Brown. He's very, very close, and we're waiting for the last sets of ballots to kind of come in on there. But look, if we end up with 53 or with 54, it is an absolutely seismic change. We're very excited about going in with a congressional majority, a Senate majority that is going to be able to move forward with President Trump's America First agenda. When we talk about one of the key hallmarks of President Trump's first term as president was promises made, promises kept. He campaigned on a certain set of core principles, worked with Congress to make sure that we got those done. And now we're going to be able to go forward and do the same thing again.
And what about the House? Again, we're some way from knowing exactly what the final numbers will be there. Are you confident the Republicans are on course to keep the majority in the House, maybe even extend it?
Yeah, cautious optimism, I think, is probably the best way to put it. It looks like we will have probably a 2 to 3 seat margin in the House of Representatives, which is very, very significant because obviously they are the table setters when it comes to any of the spending bills, as well as moving forward with a number of different initiatives. What we have seen when the Democrats have been in charge of the House is that they really, truly want to go after the president. They want to try and allow illegal immigrants to get naturalized status, and they really want to push a progressive, radical agenda. America is not a social experiment. What they need is for Congress to move forward on the issues that the American voters care about. And with Republican leadership in place, we feel comfortable about a working relationship there.
Again, as you said, maybe holding on to roughly the same majority that you had in the House. I mean, given the scale of Trump's victory, again, I know there were very fewer toss-up seats in the House this time, but that does seem maybe not quite the kind of comprehensive victory that you'd see if it's going to be another razor-thin margin in the House this time.
Well, as you said, there really are not a lot of toss-up seats anymore. The result of the redistricting that has taken place after the last several census really kind of locks in a large number of members of Congress that are in districts that, frankly, are just not going to be swing districts. So those are locked in. The fact that we were able to keep that majority, very, very important. And we really think that as a table set to have the House and the Senate going into January and Donald Trump being sworn in on January 20th is really going to allow us to get out of the gate fast in passing his agenda.
Briefly talk about money. Again, in some states you were heavily outspent by the Democrats overall. I'm sure you raised the money you wanted to do, but what was your sense of the role that campaign money played in this? Were you effective in your targeting use of the money? Would you like to have had more?
Well, look, the Democrats had a ton of money. That's not a surprise. The Democrats always have a ton of money. Kamala Harris raised and spent over $1 billion over 3 months and went down in the polls because she had no agenda, she had no message, and she had no clear vision for America. We were able to take the money that we raised and very effectively put lead on target. We were able to go out and communicate directly with voters in every single one of the battleground states. And we were able to put the president in a position for him to communicate directly with American voters, whether it was by rallies or on podcasts or on digital ads or even on TV ads. But not only him, we were able to go out and help those Senate candidates, to help the congressional candidates, and make sure that we were able to deliver that win last night.
We did have this extraordinary series of events, Michael, over the summer. President Trump was convicted. A lot of people, I think, do have a lot of skepticism about the merits of that case, but he was convicted. First former president to be convicted on felony charges. Then we had the debate, and we had Biden dropping out. We had the assassination attempt, then Kamala Harris getting the nomination, then the second assassination attempt. And yet all along, the numbers didn't seem to move much. Maybe Biden would have done a little worse than Harris. But what do you make of all that? These extraordinary events happened, and yet it didn't seem to make any sort of significant difference to the balance of the campaign.
Yeah, look, no candidate has ever run for office through tougher conditions than Donald Trump. And you talk about all of the different things that he experienced, from 2 different assassination attempts, multiple indictments, weaponized judiciary, the fact that the media was relentlessly attacking him all day, every day. Democrats were able to raise and spend over $1 billion to try and attack him. But at the end of the day, he broke through because he has a crystal clear message for the American voters. I am fighting for you, and I'm going to make your family and your community stronger and safer. And that's really, truly what the American people responded to.
As you look at it now and again, I say congratulations to you. You're the chairman. The Republican Party now today is arguably in its strongest position that it's been in terms of electoral success, at least since 2004 when George W. Bush was reelected. But arguably, you go back to the late 1980s when George H.W. Bush was elected, and even then it didn't have a big majority in the Senate. Now you've got a Republican president with a majority of the vote, with this huge successful performance across the country. You're going to have a 3 or 4 seat majority maybe in the Senate, handful of seat majority in the House. What do you put that down to? I mean, I'm sure to claim some of the credit yourself, but what does that mean? What does that tell us about the Republican Party today, how it got here, and more broadly about our politics?
Well, I think we've seen a fundamental realignment of the Republican Party. This is Donald Trump's party. This is the America First Party, and it really, truly puts us in a position right now to go out and talk to every single American voter. What we see is a common sense coalition. You're going to see a common sense agenda that's going to go forward, and really, truly, to take that mandate, it's a common sense mandate, forward is going to be great, because Donald Trump every single day has woken up to fight for the American people, and we have a party that recognizes that call and is ready to go fight for the same.
You must be pleased, by the way, that North Carolina was one of those swing states that went Donald Trump's way.
Yes, sir. It's very nice to have the home state win. That's the 3rd time in a row that we've carried the Tar Heel state for Donald J. Trump. And look, this is the greatest political comeback in history. Very excited for what this means for Donald Trump, but even more excited for what this is going to mean for the American people.
And what's next for you, Michael?
Look, I right now am got some cleanup. We've got to make sure we get these Senate races and House races done. We've got some homework here. We'll have plenty of time to figure that out as we go down the road.
Michael Whatley, chairman of the Republican National Committee, thank you very much indeed for joining Free Expression.
Yes, thank you, sir. Take care.
Well, that's it for this week. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you, in fact, for joining us all the way through this long election campaign. We'll be back again next week as we look forward now to the transition to the second Trump administration, and of course to the wider political, economic, financial, business, and indeed all other kinds of challenges that face us in these extraordinary times. Thanks again for joining us. Speak to you next week.